Lori Slater. I'm the Director of Accessibility and Disability Services.
And I'm Sierra Jewett. So I work in the Career Planning and Development Office in the Compass Center.
So we have joined together and we have started doing this 3-part series this semester. Is about navigating your transition into career. So this is our second of 3. And so today it's going to be about balancing your personal and professional image into the workplace. So today it's going to look like this. So how to craft a professional image while balancing your personal identity. So we want you to, keep those things that are important to you, but you want a job. So how do you do that? How do you balance those two? How to represent yourself on social media. So we know social media is a strong part of life. So how do we present that so that when employers look at that, we're not damaging ourselves? Networking and on your resume. How to prepare for and engage in interviews to showcase your strengths and discuss topics of disclosure. So disability disclosure is what we're going to focus on today, but it kind of applies to multiple things. Requesting accommodations and appropriate and inappropriate questions in an interview. So what you ask, what they can ask, we'll talk about some of those things. And because we have a 3rd workshop, we want to talk about what that would look like. And so that will be ensuring the right workplace fit. So you want to make sure that as you're making decisions on the place you're going to go work, you want to make sure it's a good fit for you. So we wanted to talk about that. So in that workshop, we'll look at an organization's culture, how you kind of evaluate that, how you weigh that against the things that are most important to you and making sure it's a good fit. How to advocate for yourself once you get into that workplace. How to effectively collaborate with your coworkers and successfully navigate various interactions in the workplace that might be challenging. And how to set appropriate boundaries as a new employee while still being a team player. I have some fun stories about that. Okay.
So we've broken this into a few different parts for this workshop today. So we're going to be talking about social media usage. That is a big part of the image that your workplace gets of you before they even start the hiring process. We're going to talk about, change slides on here. We're going to talk about networking and also the documents that you need for a job search process. That's definitely a representation of you when you're submitting resumes and all of that stuff. Presentation on identity, which is kind of going to get into how you dress for an interview. And then we're also going to talk about preparing for interview questions, which is more of that deep dive into what can they ask you, what might be some inappropriate questions, what are some hard questions to answer, all of those things. So first, we're going to talk about social media usage. So big question is basically, is my employer going to check and see if they can find me on social media? Overwhelmingly, yes. This statistic that I have up here is from the 2018 Career Builder Survey, that 70% of employers use social media to screen candidates. And this is like kind of even before they offer you an interview. So when you submit your resume and they start looking and Googling you basically to see what they can find. I believe, and I've seen different numbers, I believe now in like 2023, this is closer to like maybe 80%. I saw something that said 90%. As you can imagine, it's becoming increasingly more common just as social media has been growing for the past few years. About 43% of employers use social media to check on current employees. So even when you're already at the company, there are a lot of employers that will still kind of monitor what you're posting. A lot of employers, when surveyed, say that they're not necessarily looking for anything negative. Obviously, they will notice if they find something they found that they think is negative. But they also just, one of the other reasons that they check what you're posting is to see just kind of what you're like, if you might be a good fit for the workplace, to get kind of a feel for your personality before getting you in the interview process. So this can include Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, and other social media platforms.
And I think that also stretches to maybe not even just the employer searching, but think about who you are interacting with on social media within the organization.
Mhm.
So if you are friends with other people in the organization and you are posting things that are not exactly favorable, those things probably will get back to that employer in some way. So you've got to think about not just the boss might not be looking, but the other people might be, and it would get back to them. I've seen that happen as well.
Don't forget who follows you.
Yeah, things happen.
So with, and we'll go to the next slide very quick. Oh, you're good. So while they might not be searching for anything negative, or while they might say that they're not searching for anything negative, 57% of employers said that they have found something just in their social media screening that has led them to say, no, we're not going to hire this person. We might not even interview this person at all, right? So generally that is just kind of like red flags. You can probably guess what those are, right? Illegal activity, talking about drugs, anything really offensive, explicit material, violent or aggressive behavior. If you're someone who seems really volatile and you're always getting into arguments online very publicly about just a variety of topics, they might think, okay, this person might be combative in the workplace. Not what most employers are looking for, right? Confidential information. So if you are someone who is posting about information that really is kind of inappropriate, especially like information about your workplace is inappropriate, or like even airing grievances about your current workplace or previous ones, as an employer, I'm going to look at that and say, okay, well, either while they're here with me or after they leave, they're going to be bashing my company. So I'm not going to hire that person. Right.
So I'll give you a couple examples of that. So I come from the side of education. I taught in K-12. My daughter teaches in K-12. It is absolutely known when I was teaching pre-service teachers, that was an adamant, you do not post on your social media anything related to any of that. You do not have a drink in your hand. You do not do any of that, because those administrators will look. And when you get hired, there's all those parent Facebook groups and all of those things. They will look at that and it will come back on you.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter is adamant about do not, we're doing family things or she's out with friends or whatever.
Don't tag me.
Do not tag me. Do not, like, I was never here. Do not do that. And the other one, like personally, there is a family member by marriage. She's young, and my husband and I recently just had to unfriend her from our social media because of the things that she has certain religious, political, personal beliefs that are just inappropriate. And she's very verbal about that on social media. We own a business, and there are many of our customers who identify as certain identities that she is very much against. We cannot be associated with that. That would be very harmful to our business. So we, family or not, you're out. Can't have it. Can't associate with it. So you just have to really think about those things.
And that might be different for different fields too, which is kind of the caveat for a lot of the stuff we talk about. But education is a really good example of where they are checking this stuff, and they're a lot more strict about what they would consider to be inappropriate versus maybe some other fields. Right? So is it better to have no social media and for them to not find anything? No.
So
Depends on the employer, but a fair amount of employers, 47% from that 2018 survey, said that if they couldn't find any information about someone online, they wouldn't call them for an interview.
Wow.
So, and that's for a variety of reasons. I mean, it's individual to the employer. They might find it, just in the age of so many people having social media, they might just find it a little strange. It might come off as, oh, they're trying to hide their social media accounts. They have ones, but they're not under the name, right? What are they posting on there that they don't want me to see? Or it just might be, they're trying to get that kind of feel for personality or feel for like who you are as a person. And that might just be an important part of their screening process, and they're not really getting anything if they find
I
nothing.
have a question.
Yep.
What if you go ahead and sign up for like social media type stuff,
Mhm.
that you do it under like business type? Like
Yeah. So that's a great question.
therapist type stuff instead of personal.
Yes. So that's a great question. That is kind of what I'm going to get into actually on the next slide,
Okay.
which is a good solution if you either So either if you don't want to have, if you have social media accounts that you want to be able to post on and you don't want employers to view those, you still want to be able to, a lot of students are like, I still want to be able to post pictures from my spring break with my friends because it was a fun time on my Instagram. I might not want my employer to view that. Those can be set to private. But if you want your accounts to be set to private and or you don't have social media accounts that you use pretty frequently, LinkedIn is basically the solution to all of those questions. So LinkedIn is basically like the professional social media platform. It is where you would put, go to the next slide, because I actually have a couple of good examples. So this is where you would put information about who you are as a person professionally, right? So this is a view of like what it looks like on the app on your phone. And then this is just like, a little bit more of an example of what you can put for an About Me section. But as you can see, we have a nice professional photo, just some kind of headshot that shows you clearly. A background photo. I mean, they have kind of some ones that you can just pick from on the platform that are pretty professional, but sometimes people like to put, if they're currently working somewhere, maybe the employer. I think mine in the background has just like a Drury logo. Or sometimes people will put like things that they're passionate about. Maybe some kind of artistic design they created if they're in an artistic field. They'll have name, what they currently do, where they've worked previously. It's basically your resume as if it was on a social media platform. A little bit more visual.
And that
as
could
well.
take the place of Facebook.
Mhm,
and
yep.
take a talk.
Yeah, so if they find that, that's what they're going to look at. They'll be like, great. Now your LinkedIn profile, it doesn't necessarily benefit you in the job search if it doesn't have anything on it. If it's just your name, no photo, no information, it's not really doing anything for you at that point. You probably will see a couple of those of people who started a LinkedIn profile and then just didn't finish it completely. But if you have the basics, name, a good professional photo, some kind of small, like what you do, summary about what you're interested in, then you're good. And you can put more stuff too. You can post on there if you go to a conference. You can post about, had a great time at this conference today. Some people use it more frequently than others. Kind of depends on the field and if other people in that field use it a lot.
I go in waves on mine.
Right. Higher
I
education.
go a long time and not use it, and then I'll use it.
So how do people see this? Do they like pick your name, or is it like a scroll where everything comes to everyone that's involved in that platform?
Yeah, that's a good question. So with LinkedIn, so usually what they're going to do during this like screening process is they'll just Google your name, right? So this should be associated with your full name, and this is what will probably come up. Sometimes we have to social media look up students to see if where they're working after college, just for like reporting purposes. And so sometimes they'll be like, okay, like Sierra Jowood LinkedIn, Sierra Jowood Instagram, right? Just to see like what comes up. And that's probably what they'll do. Search your name. If nothing comes up, they'll start putting in platform names afterwards. So in that case, it would come up as long as it's associated with obviously the full name that you give them. And then they're able to view it.
Do you see these connections?
Yes.
You make connections, like it'll come up with suggestions like other people that went to jury, or if you're a music therapist, it might make suggestions of other music therapists. So you start making connections with people in your field.
So this could be a good place also, like we're going to talk a little bit about networking, but that's where it comes into, it might be a good job search tool. If you get enough connections on there to kind of make it worthwhile. If you connect with recruiters, other people in your field, someone who is not hiring right now, but when you graduate with your degree, might be working in a place that might hire you, and connect with them. So it is a very useful platform, but they'll be able to view you, and you can view people you're connected to, and then kind of their network. It works as like the bigger your network is, the more people you can access.
So is this
Yeah.
something I can set up and start using now,
Mhm.
even though I'm a student?
For sure.
A lot of students have LinkedIn accounts.
And this is a good time now because you can add, while you're thinking about it and while you're in front of people, you can start like connecting with them, with your classmates and with your professors. A little bit harder to remember exactly everyone you interacted with in college once you graduate. But that's a good question. And we can certainly in our office do just like a sit down, create a LinkedIn profile meeting. So that's something we can help with specifically as well.
Have you used LinkedIn at all? Have you started looking at it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Good. Okay.
Oh, what is your name? I'll look it up. of it. Didn't.
We'll have you spell it afterwards. We'll,
Okay.
Yeah. So basically bottom line is check your social media accounts, or at least just Google your own name and see what, what you see. Because you want to know, because employers are going to do it. And you want to know what they're seeing and if that reflects what you want them to see. Perfect.
So Sierra mentioned a little bit about networking, so we'll talk a little bit more about what that might look like.
Mhm.
So it can be an important part for connecting with people in your chosen field, and it can be the most common way to find a job.
Mhm.
So it can look at different ways for different professions, but it can be often about attending job fairs. So if you follow career planning and development on Instagram, is a great way, or even just flyers they post, they
Wait, email you.
advertise in a multitude of
Some
ways.
point.
But there's several job fairs that they participate in throughout the year. So attending some of those job fairs, participating in internships. I know a lot of the different majors require internships. What is your major? Architecture.
Mhm.
So you guys have to do an internship?
Yes.
Yes. You guys have to do an internship, I
I
know.
believe so.
So a lot of the different majors have to do internships as part of the degree, so which is great. Doing volunteer work, if there's something you're just passionate about. Some of the organizations on campus, if you belong to one, that's built in too. And this whole piece is why we require those things, because it's such an important part of getting a job, which is ultimately what we want for you. Obtaining part-time work outside of going to school, particularly if you can do something in your related field. Is a great way, because that just kind of gets you in there somewhere. Joining professional organizations. So I know there's organizations for you. I know there's organizations for you. For me, when I was going to school, I was studying special education. So the national organization for special ed is Council of Exceptional Children at the national level. Every state has a chapter, and most colleges has a student chapter. So I joined each one of those levels when I was in school. So if you have a professional organization, you can usually join them at a student rate. So I encourage you to do that.
Do that now, because the student rate is
Do it now.
very different than the rate when you're
Yes.
not a student.
Absolutely. So do
Very
that.
I
stark
joined the
difference.
AMTA
Oh,
right when
perfect.
I started.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important. And you can follow those organizations on all the social media, and that's another connection for you. So it all connects. It's part
Well,
of
and
your
also
network.
with organizations, I don't think we put it on here, but that might be helpful too with conference participation. So if you ever want to, a big part of a big skill that employers are looking for with their employees is that self-development piece. That outside of just your normal workplace activities that they ask you to do, you are also passionate about improving your skills, learning more about your field, engaging in different ways just in your field. One of those ways can include going to conferences. So a lot of these organizations will probably have an annual conference or a local regional conference that you can attend. That's a really great place to add LinkedIn connections. You might meet someone else who works at a different institution you wouldn't have met otherwise. Maybe the next conference you guys present some research together that you've worked on now, and that's something else to add to your resume. So just expanding your connections beyond just your office that you work in is a really good idea.
Or outside of jury, like
Yep.
expanding your as many people and places that you can touch makes that network. Connecting with alumni in your field. So jury has lots of alumni all over the world. So connecting with as many alumni as you can. And then LinkedIn, as we had talked about. My networking story for you. My first teaching job, I was at an airport. I taught in Las Vegas. I was at an airport in Las Vegas. I was going through school. I went to school as an adult. I was picking up my son at the airport, and there was a lady. She was sitting there in a wheelchair, and I was standing next to her, waiting. And I said, "Can we take you down to baggage claim?" And she said, No, my daughter's coming up to get me. Or they're supposed to be taking me down to my daughter down in baggage claim. I'm like, "We're going that way anyway. I'll take you." She's like, No. I'll wait for the airline people. Like, you might be here for a while. We'll take you down there. It's fine. So we take her down there, and we're in the elevator, and she says, she was asking us, what do you do? Da, da, da. I said, well, I'm going to school. I'm going to be a teacher. She's like, my daughter is a principal. So we talk, and sure enough, that principal gave me my first job. So always be talking about what you do. I know career planning and development talks about that 30-second elevator pitch. In the elevator, making my pitch. I had no idea who I was talking to, but always talk yourself up. Always have a smile. Always be friendly, because you never know what connections you're going to make. That was my first job.
Nice. So another important piece of how you represent yourself in the job search process is just the documents that you're creating, right? So for pretty much any type of job application, you'll have a resume that you're creating, at the very least. Probably other documents too, but at very least a resume. So this also can include like really any written communication. You should be professional and be representing yourself well anytime you're communicating with the employer before meeting with them, and after. But this includes emails. I don't have this on here, but if you message them to ask questions, that could either be through directly messaging a recruiter on LinkedIn that is currently hiring for a job. You can like message with them on there, or even calling HR. You want to communicate professionally as well if you're calling to ask questions. Anytime you answer questions on job applications, which for a lot of students that haven't applied to jobs before, it can be a little bit surprising to them that they have to write a resume and then answer all of the same questions on the job application, but they can't copy and paste in some formats. So you definitely need to be giving yourself time to write all of those out. Resumes, cover letters. Some jobs will ask you to write a cover letter, which is essentially just a one-page document that says, hey, here are some highlights of the job description you gave me. Here are some highlights of my resume. Here's how they go together. Right. And then, thank you letters, emails. You always want to follow up. Anytime you interview with someone, you want to follow up with a thank you afterwards within the next, basically 24 hours, essentially. All of this, when we say you need to be communicating well and professionally, you need to be addressing the person professionally, right? Can you see on documents that you've been getting with names that that person has a doctorate? You should be addressing them differently rather than Mrs. Slater. You would say Dr. Slater, right? You should be making sure that there's not really any spelling errors, grammatical errors. You're not using a lot of slang terms or just like really like informal language. You want to just be really careful with your documents that you're submitting during the hiring process.
I think for me, my biggest challenge, I just know this for myself, when I go into an interview, I have a terrible issue remembering names. So when I leave that interview and I go, I'm like, dang it, how am I going to write this thank you letter when I can't remember people's names? So I always go into an interview with a little notepad to make notes, because I'm not going to remember, especially if I went in and there was multiple people sitting around the table, like, oh crap, what am I going to do?
Right.
So it just know for yourself, like, am I going to remember everybody's name? Do I think I'm going to interview with one person, 3 people? Like, just make sure you're kind of planning about this ahead of time.
And trying to write down some contact information too, or just making sure you have access to at least like one email you're going to send these to afterwards, because if not, then it's harder to follow up with an email. So with your resume, so this is particularly important. This is basically one page, your pitch to get an interview. This is really like just condensed all they're going to see of you before actually offering you the interview process. You want to make sure that it's like your greatest hits on one page. So your resume should highlight your skills and greatest achievements, give a clear picture of your experience, work experience, internships, volunteer, whatever is relevant to the type of job you're applying to. Show your education, make it sound like you're confident in yourself. If your resume uses some language that sounds very unsure or like you're trying to downplay what you've done, if you don't sound confident in what you've done, then I'm not going to be confident in what you've done. One example of this that I tried to highlight actually yesterday for a student, instead of saying like manage daily office task, including this, this, and this, they said basic office task. or we want to work with the language that you have on there because we want to keep it positive. So instead of resolved complaints, customer complaints when required, sounds like your boss had to drag you to do that. It's effectively resolved customer complaints and ensured a satisfactory experience, right? We wanted to make it sound like you are confident in your skills and you have a positive attitude. It should also be readable, concise, easy to read. That's kind of hard to do with resume formatting. It's just really strange to try and fit everything on one page and work with where the white space is to make it look nice. And also be free of mistakes. So you definitely want to spell check, give yourself time to edit, have someone else look over your resume, all of that. With your documents, it's a really good idea to come to our office and have us do a resume review. Because with a resume review, we can either help you if you're trying to craft it, if you're trying to like, I don't know how to describe my experiences, what should I put on here? Or if you have one that's like pretty near to finished and you just want someone to say like, are there any mistakes on it? We can look at that. So presentation and identity. This is where we're going to get a little bit into like day of an interview. I'm going to like be in person in front of them or be on Zoom in front of them. They're going to see me at some point. There are some general guidelines that we do recommend in terms of what you're going to wear, how you're going to present yourself during an interview. Whether it's a formal interview or like, hey, let's chat for coffee, you would want to dress up and be professional for those meetings. So we always say wear an outfit that is a step above the position you're applying for. I have on like black jeans and a Drake polo today. That's what I wear to work. I would not wear that to my interview with Drake. Be a little strange if I already had Drake polo before I worked or went here. What I would probably wear is more so a little bit what Dr. Slater's wearing, some kind of blazer or jacket. I'd probably be wearing different shoes. I'd wear my heels instead of tennis shoes. And I also would probably dress, when we say dress a step above the job you're applying for, if you've kind of either through an internship or some fashion like been in an office setting that's similar to where you're going to work, you've kind of seen what people are wearing, go a little bit nicer than that. So if you don't think in the job that you're currently applying for, you would be wearing a blazer or a suit jacket every day, okay. Probably for the interview process, you want to go ahead and take that step above though, and dress a little bit more professionally, just to make a good impression. Brandon, do you have something to add to that for like a better description?
Yeah, I mean, for dressing up, it also depends on the industry.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you're in a technical field or something like that, sometimes a polo and khakis are appropriate. But in general, the interview process, you know, for men and women, this is a little different, but just focusing on professionalism of the outfit.
Mhm.
And it's kind of the whole package too. So, you know, if you got like your nice suit, you don't want to have, you know, damaged sneakers on, you know. So it's kind of like the whole thing. But
Also, during a Zoom interview, wear professional pants.
yeah.
Don't wear sweatpants.
Yeah.
Because they may ask you to go close your blinds, and you have to
Right.
stand up, and then it's awkward if you're not wearing professional
You
pants.
got pajamas on the bottom half.
It's awkward. I've had some strange Zoom interviews with students before. Been like, okay, this is fine.
Right.
This is an interview, so it should be different. But yeah, so dress basically a step above what you would think that you would wear in that setting. A little bit more professionally on the interview day.
I generally suggest a more conservative approach.
Mhm.
And you can show a little personality, but you don't want to be too loud with like the jewelry you're wearing or earrings or anything that can be distracting from your message and presentation. That's kind of the things you want to.
So that's what like we discourage. We want them to be focusing on your conversation. Now this is different. I mean, like, so students will ask me like, okay, so I can't wear any kind of larger earrings or I can't wear a shirt with a pattern on it. It's not that. You can, but you would probably want like, if you have like a shirt with like a bold pattern on it, probably the only bold pattern you want to be wearing, right? Maybe the rest of your outfit is just like black pants or black slacks, black, you know, blazer jacket. We don't want to go super distracting too with makeup or with perfume. Particularly with perfume, I think if somebody walks in and they're wearing like so much cologne, that's all I can think about for the whole rest of the meeting. So just trying to make sure that you are dressed nicely. You want them to basically look at your outfit and go, okay, good. and then not think about it anymore afterwards. That's the ideal scenario. We do want to kind of talk about, and this is going to be more of a conversational piece because it's so dependent on the situation, but I do get a lot of questions from students, and I talk about this also with others, just kind of at jury, about how do I balance representing my identity in the way that I would normally dress and express myself with the standards of what most companies would consider to be professional, right? So I'm going to use one example. Unfortunately, a lot of people in, there's an expectation in a lot of companies and, you know, kind of the workforce that sometimes natural hair for Black individuals is not professional. That is just like someone having their natural hair. Well, there's a lot of companies, at least previously, and probably still now, that would view that as like, no, that you need to like have your hair straightened or changed in some type of way. Unfortunate. That would be, you know, discriminatory based on their appearance. It does happen. Now, for that particular example, there is recent legislation to kind of help with that issue. So the Crown Act, I can't remember what the entire acronym is for, but creating a respectful environment for natural hair is like something that fits in there somewhere. The Crown Act was passed in 2019, and that is specifically to try and combat discrimination based on natural hair in the workplace. But yeah, that's something that unfortunately a lot of Black individuals deal with during the interview process. Another example is like, okay, well, do I think based on the company that I'm going to, or the workplace that I'm going to, do I feel comfortable if I'm Muslim wearing a hijab during the interview process? That's obviously going to say something. That's going to give them more information about me than they would have if I wasn't wearing one, right? I think we actually, in a conversation I was having the other day with one of our like diversity directors, she was talking about an individual who wore her hijab everywhere else in her life, except at work. She would take it off in her car, put it in the back seat, and go to work. And she told people at her company that one time, and they were like horrified that she felt the need to do that to be accepted at work and to, you know, not have people have some kind of bias against her. So luckily in that example, I believe that that person did start wearing their hijab to work, and that worked out well. But that's something that people have to deal with a lot, is just, okay, if I give this company more information about myself through my dress and how I present myself, is that going to affect whether or not I get the job? I'm trying to think of specific examples I've had students ask me, or if I wear maybe dress that is more traditional to my culture, but still professional, but like I'm from a different culture, and this is kind of what I would wear here versus like maybe like in America or in this certain area of the country. We're going to get a little bit more into this topic of kind of how do you feel out a workplace's culture and how accepting they would be towards your identity. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next workshop, and that's what we're going to focus on. For this, I always just kind of tell students, like, if you are going to want to dress differently, is that something that you're going to want to do for the whole rest of the time you work there? And would you want to work for a company that would discriminate against you based on certain factors, right? That is, if you wouldn't want to work there, if they don't think you're professional with your natural hair, then that's obviously something to think about when even interviewing or applying for the job or accepting an offer. Also goes into that, what are your options, right? Some individuals don't have the luxury of, you know, might be I need a job right now, or my industry is very small in the area that I live in. It's really kind of an individual-based conversation. We're happy to talk through what you want to wear for an interview. We always talk through that with students and kind of like, hey, what are you planning on wearing? I have a student who, I think multiple times, because I've done multiple interviews with her, has come in like in her outfit for the interview and said like, you know, are these shoes too much? Or like, is my makeup too much? Is my hair okay? Even I think before our career fair, she came in and was like, this is the outfit I'm wearing. So if you ever have doubts, feel free to just come into the office and kind of ask us questions and we can help with that.
A lot of this stuff is like, you know, general guidelines, but it's general guidelines based off of common knowledge, but basically like, you know, what people say or what they're expecting. So if you think of like social norms and you go into an interview with social norms, like if you violate that, it makes people be uncomfortable or seen as negative. So you're just trying to dress in a way that shows respect and that you're serious about the opportunities.
Right. And some of the obvious things too, like, you know, we wouldn't wear any t-shirts with profanity on it or anything, or a logo for a different company. Wouldn't wear a Pepsi shirt to an interview with Coca-Cola. Little things.
So we're going to start going through some of these other ones,
Mhm.
like the interview questions. We have quite a few on there. We're just going to go over a couple of them as we talk through it for time's sake, and then give you a resource where you can see a resource that's on career planning and development.
Mhm.
What is that document?
Job search guide.
Job search guide.
Yep.
Thank you. And so that's online and you have access to that. And of course you have access to career planning and development, but we'll kind of continue on here. We'll just give you a few of them.
So you're going to want to prepare for some of the most common interview questions asked. There are some questions that, like, if they're so common that if you got asked them in an interview and you stumbled a little bit or got really awkward about it, it wouldn't be presenting yourself well because it would give them the impression you did not prepare for this at all. You want to do some level of preparation for an interview beforehand, practicing your answers to questions. So common questions, tell me about yourself. That they're going to ask you that in some form. If you stumble on that question, that's not really a great look, because that seems like I'm not confident. Somebody the other day in a panel that we had with employers said, my pet peeve is if I say, tell me about yourself, and somebody says, I don't know, what do you want to know? I don't know, what do you want to tell me? What do you want to communicate with me about yourself? So obviously they're going to ask you that. Why do you want this job? Why'd you apply? What do you know about our company? You need to be able to kind of show that you did some research. Strengths and weaknesses. That one's a hard question to ask, or a hard question to answer. Greatest weakness or a mistake you've made. Practice those, because it's hard to answer those on the fly in a way that is good, that it represents yourself in a good way. We can help you kind of craft that answer. But yeah, these are some common questions. Behavior-based questions are also common. Can't predict exactly what type of question, which question they're going to ask you, but they'll probably ask you some type of behavior-based question. And that's going to be, I keep pressing this and it's not going forward. So behavior-based questions are going to be something that ask you to tell a story. So tell me about a time when you had to deal with conflict and how you successfully resolved that. Tell me about a time when you, again, made a mistake and what you learned from that, right? We have a method for helping you kind of craft, okay, I have 2 to 3 stories and here's how I'm going to change them to fit whatever the question is. So if you want to practice some of those types of questions, please come to our office and we'll help with that.
Okay, they are also going to, after they get done with some of those basic questions, you need to be prepared with 2 to 3 questions to ask them.
Mm-hmm.
You never want to say, I don't have any questions. You need to be prepared with a couple of questions. And as much as you can reflect that you know about their company, wrapped up in those questions, the better. Mm-hmm. So here are some examples that you might be ready for. Something about, what characteristics does a successful employee have at your company, or a person in this role, something like that. How would you describe the management style of your organization? Just be ready with a couple, 2, 3 good questions. You want to have several so that if one of your go-tos gets answered within the previous questions, you have something else to fall back on. So be prepared with some questions. You want to have something to ask them.
If you don't have anything to ask them, then you're not curious at all. And if I have a candidate that's not curious at all about anything regarding this job, a little bit of a red flag for me, right? Like, you should be somewhat excited about something. So
at this stage, at an interview process, you're not asking them anything about the benefits package. You're not asking about salary. You're not asking, like, when do I get my first vacation days? You're not asking about any of that stuff. That comes once an offer has been made. Mm-hmm. If you get the phone call, hey, we'd like to hire you, that's when you can start saying, great, can I ask what the salary is going to be? Like, that's going to come later. You're not going to ask that at the interview stage. And so we also want to talk about some questions that that kind of leads into, if there is a disability, if there is, some other things you don't want to disclose, like what questions can they ask and can they not ask? What crosses the line? So they cannot ask disability-related questions until after a job offer is made. So at the interview stage, they cannot ask a question that is giving disability-related information.
Mhm.
Okay. They can ask about an ability to perform a specific job function or ask you to demonstrate a skill. So if a job offer is made, it can be conditional. Some jobs require like a medical examination. You know that from DOT. So a job offer can be conditional pending medical examination, in which they can ask disability-related questions, but they can't do it at the interview stage. Okay. And if you have a disability that is visible, if somebody came in a wheelchair, if they came in and it was obvious they were blind, then that changes a little bit. Then they can ask more specific questions because it is obvious that the person has a disability, and then they can ask more specific questions about how they are going to be able to perform a specific task.
It has to be task related though. So it has to be related to the job functions, right?
Yes, it has to be specific to the job that they're interviewing for.
In an interview, if you come in and you have a prosthetic, they can't say like, what happened?
Yeah, no.
Inappropriate. That wouldn't be the appropriate question.
Yeah. So for instance, in our company, our biggest thing is, can you read a tape measure? Like, I need to know if you can read a tape measure. And so we can ask that specific task question, and we could ask them to demonstrate that skill. So, but that's not, and we would ask that of everybody. That's the other thing, is that they have to be, if they're going to ask a specific job function, we have to ask that of every person that applies for that job. Cannot ask how many days an applicant was sick, because that could lead to maybe a health-related disability. So we can't ask that specific question. We could state what our company's attendance requirement is and ask them if they can meet that. So that's kind of the difference between those two. And they can't ask about genetic information like family medical history. Mm-hmm. Again, those could lead to disability-related questions. They can't ask demographic information, age, race, gender, religion, national origin. They cannot ask about affiliations like clubs, organizations, memberships, things like that. This could indicate like you belong to some organization that could be identifiable in some way. If you belong to an LGBTQ organization, that could be identifiable with something that you don't want to identify in a interview situation.
They shouldn't be asking you questions about information that is illegal to make a decision based on, hiring wise, race, sexuality, all of that.
Anything. Marital status, relationships, childcare. Do you have a car? As long as you can get to work and do your job, they can't ask any of that. They can't ask about military status or because then they could make assumptions that there could be PTSD from your military status and all of that stuff. So.
I do want to, and I think when we transition to the next slide, we'll go into a little bit more about disability disclosure. But I do want to address kind of like, what do you do if you get asked an inappropriate question? That's kind of hard. Some employers don't mean to ask questions that would be like not appropriate for the process. Or like they're well-meaning, but they don't realize that like, hey, this is kind of a weird question to ask me. Are you married? Do you have kids? Oh, I go to this church. What church do you go to? Just questions about stuff that they shouldn't be making hiring decisions based on. Sometimes that's kind of awkward to reply to. If you recognize that the question makes you uncomfortable and that it's inappropriate, just kind of depends on reading the situation. We don't necessarily recommend coming out the gate and like aggressively responding with like, that's an inappropriate question. You can't legally ask me that. True. I don't think the interview is going to have a good feel after that interaction. Sometimes it's a little bit more subtle of just, you know, oh, you can either avoid the question. So do you go to church in town? Maybe I just moved here and I say, oh, I haven't really found like a lot of stuff in town yet. Like I'm kind of just getting used to my apartment and, trying to find a job. And that's what I've worried about so far. Doesn't tell you anything about my religious status or whether or not I do go to church regularly. It just kind of avoids the question. And then later on you reflect on, do I want to work somewhere that would ask me that? Does that affect whether or not I take this job? Or it could be subtle, but a little bit more firm. Is that, I'm curious if that's relevant to the position that I'm applying for. I say it nicely, but it brings to the point of the conversation, oh, is it? Oh, maybe I shouldn't ask that. So, hard to deal with those questions, but we want you to know what questions you should not be asked.
Yeah. All right. So disability disclosure, and this, it kind of relates back to other areas of disclosure in your life too, but we're just gonna kind of talk about disability disclosure because that's what I know best. So the first thing, kind of ask yourself, do they need to know in order for me to be successful in this position? And so if you can answer that question, that will kind of help you decide if disclosure is necessary. And then also thinking about accommodations, do I need an accommodation to complete the interview? So if an individual was in a wheelchair, they might need to disclose up front because they would need to the person that they are interviewing with to know that they're going to need access into that building. I know sometimes students come here for admissions and admissions, it's helpful if admissions know that they're using a wheelchair because some of our buildings are not accessible. Music therapy is not accessible.
Yeah.
So if they're coming here to tour, that's just something that we need to know.
Right.
So same would be for an interview, right? If they're going into a building that's not accessible and the person they're interviewing with is on the second floor, it's not going to be a good situation. So that might be something where they would disclose that from the interview. If there's a pre-employment exam and somebody had vision problems that they needed some accommodations for, that would probably be a place that they would start their disclosure. And then maybe that nothing is needed until they're employed and, overhead lights bother me and they give me migraines. I might need to say something at that point. So it's just kind of depending on, or maybe the person has something, but it really doesn't affect them if they feel they ever need to disclose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of deciding what. So what does that look like? Disability is defined as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So sometimes people think, well, I don't really have a disability. Well, if there's anxiety, depression, another mental health, it all falls under that area of disability. Sometimes we think about, well, it's not a wheelchair. I don't have, I'm not deaf. I'm not blind. It is more than that. And so we want to make sure people understand that if there's also mental health issues that are documented that a person might need a support in the workplace, that falls under that as well.
And to that point, as an example, one of the reasons we did this workshop is because we had questions from students, or I was noticing questions from students that are like, I had a couple of students actually, one after another, ask me, okay, well, in an interview process, or during the hiring process, should I mention or should I ask a question about their work from home policy because I have really severe anxiety or there's a lot of different things that could require you to possibly maybe work from home or take more days off. But should I tell them that because I don't know how it's going to affect me working from home or me working in the office or me having to take sick days for various
health conditions.
Yeah. Which they wouldn't know necessarily from the interview process as they would know if you were in a wheelchair or you were using sign language or something, but it might affect
those hidden disabilities.
Yeah.
So a qualified employee or applicant with a disability is an individual who, with or without the reasonable accommodations, can perform the essential functions of the job in question. So, ultimately, you still have to be able to perform the functions of the job that you're applying for. They can't, just like here at Drury, I give accommodations, but ultimately you still have to be able to, whatever the requirements of that course are, you still have to be able to do those requirements of the course. The accommodations are just to support you make it equal, but you still have to be able to do the course. Same in the job environment. You still have to be able to perform the functions of the job. And the employer is required to make a reasonable accommodation if it would not impose an undue burden on the operation of the business. An undue hardship or undue burden is financial, could be one of them. It could be like changing their operations. They could, a small company could change how they operate to accommodate someone. So if it's an undue hardship, then they don't have to do that. So a lot of people are often concerned about being discriminated against, and so they just don't disclose, or they are afraid to, or they just don't know how to do that. And so the law protects them from that. So we want to make sure people are aware of that. So that protection comes under Title I of ADA, prohibits private employers, state and local governments, employment agencies, and labor unions from discriminating against qualified individuals, which we talked about, with disabilities in job application procedures, hiring, firing, advancement, compensation, job training, and other terms, conditions, and privileges of employment. So if you have a disability, later on you have a disability, you're all protected, and you need to ask for those accommodations if that's what you need.
So as we mentioned, our next workshop will kind of go into some of the topics we mentioned earlier. This is going to be more about ensuring the right workplace fit. So a little bit more from the perspective of like once you have the job or once you're accepting the job offer, we've kind of focused now on the before process, how I present myself throughout trying to get the job. Here we're going to go a little bit more into, making sure that how do I interact with others in the office? How do I ensure that if I have certain values, that they kind of connect with the values of this company? How do I research company based on those things? So all of that is going to go into that workshop.
The better fit you have, the longer you can stay there
Yes.
and advance and all of those things. So we
Yes.
want that to be good.
For sure. So that's going to be Thursday, April 27th, same room, same time.